All right, we are running our meeting. We're on record and we are live to Facebook at the moment. So just a couple minutes and we'll get things going. I'm going to be on the promo slide until then.
Hi, Gary. You look better than you did this afternoon. You were working too hard.
Yeah, they put me up in the windmill this afternoon. It was kind of fun. Oh,
Hi, Snowman.
you get your project done, Phil?
I've got it ready to set up. I've got to talk to Chris about it. The menorah is in the village park.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Todd, I've got 6 o'clock, so if you're ready to roll, let's go.
I am. Good evening. It is the Waunakee Village Board meeting here, 6 p.m., November 16th. Thank you for joining us. Just a few basic things before we get rolling. For those public who are attending, I see several of you are on here. You're going to be muted, but I can unmute you as the meeting host when opportunities come up. There's both public hearings this evening as well as the public comment item when you can make comments on items either on or not on the agenda. That feature will be allowed by doing your raise hand, clicking the raise hand button on Zoom, at which point I can bring in those participants in the order that hands are raised. Board members and fellow panelists, you should be muted and remain muted unless you need to participate. And besides board members, please also mute your video unless you have an agenda item in discussion. And then when board discussion occurs, the village president will call upon board members to physically raise their hand like this when you have a comment. And then when roll call occurs, be sure to unmute and those will be taken. Every vote will be taken by roll call. With that, I'll turn it over to Village President Chris Zellner.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting for November 16, 2020 to order. Roll call, please.
Nyla Fry. Here. Gary Hertzberg.
Here.
Aaron Moran.
Here.
Bill Ranum. Kristen Runge.
Here.
Phil Willems.
Here.
Chris Zellner.
Here. Thank you, Caitlin. Next, we have confirmation of open meeting compliance, public postings, official notice, online availability. Caitlin.
I can confirm that the draft agenda was published in the Waunakee Tribune on November 12th. The final agenda was posted at all 3 village posting locations on November 13th, and the final agenda and packet were made available online on November 13th.
All right, thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda. Would anybody like anything pulled, or I'd look for a motion?
I would move for approval of consent agenda.
Okay, motion by Gary Hertzberg. Nyla, second?
Yes, second.
Okay. Any other comments with this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Nyla Fry.
Yes.
Kristen Runge.
Yes.
Chris Zellner.
Yes.
Phil Willems.
Yes.
Aaron Moran.
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next we have our public comment section for anybody who'd like to make a comment for anything that's either on the agenda or not on the agenda for this evening. And if you'd like to, please raise your hand and Todd will be allowing you in.
And I would clarify that if you want to make a comment on an item listed for public hearing, please keep those comments for those public hearing moments. Otherwise, we'll take comments as they come in here. I have one. I'll allow in David Betcher. Okay, if you could unmute David.
My comment was going to be on one of the public hearings, so I can wait until that.
So, and to be clear, Caitlin, can you just mention the items that are on for public hearing this evening?
Items on for public hearing this evening include the amendment to the Village Code Section 133-16, restrictions on multifamily housing. Another public hearing is amendment to the 2017 Comprehensive Plan. This is the ratio between single-family housing and multifamily housing. And then our final public hearing is on the 2021 budget.
Oh, then I guess it's not, because it's on the TIF.
Okay, David, go ahead.
As you know, the school board has a policy for how we vote and look at TIFs. And
Just a moment, Dave. Is anyone else having difficulty hearing David? Maybe speak up a little louder or closer to the mic, Dave. That would help us out.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So basically, the school board has a policy of how we look at TIFs. And in looking at TIFs, our main issue is the but-for test as to whether a TIF would happen with or without the incremental financing. And in the way we look at it in this case is that if you look at the but-for test for this TIF, it is based on rental property of the warehouse, if the warehouse were rented out. And it says that due to that rental, it would be a -1% if they did this without money. If you give them the, what is it, over it's going to take $6 to $8 million over the time. It's going to give them a 1% profit if that was a rental property. The thing is, this isn't a rental property. This is a manufacturing facility. It's being built as a manufacturing facility, and therefore the cost to expense ratio should be done on that. If you build that property to build a manufacturing facility and then rent it out, of course you're going to lose money because you put far more capacity into it than any rental property would normally need. So it should have been based on a manufacturing concept, and the possible potential income from it should have been based on that. But in the long run, the other question comes in. This is sort of like Hy-Vee. Hy-Vee came and asked for a TIF. Why? Because they can, and they might as well have. They asked for a TIF, and at first it was looking like they were going to get it. But then Festival Food shows up and says, we don't need a TIF. We're going to build a supermarket because people are going to want to come to it. And then suddenly Hy-Vee drops their TIF. Why? Because it was about just reducing their costs.
Time.
Go ahead, David. I'll give you 15 more minutes if you can wrap up.
Sure. So the school board will be voting against this TIF, and we encourage but we know that MATC always votes with the local municipality. So really the JFB is not going to have an impact on this because it's going to be at best through the chair voting for it. We encourage the village board members to look at this, that Octopi is a great business. It has competitors in the area and giving them an unfair advantage.
Okay, Dave, I have to cut you off there. Plus, you've gone quiet again for some reason. So, I'm gonna cut you off there because we've got to move on and we've got to keep with our budget or with our agenda for this evening. So, thank you for your comments. I appreciate them. Okay, Todd, any others?
Yes, I'll bring in Jerry or Linda. Okay.
It's Linda Ashmore, 114 South Street. So is the TID 9 not as a public hearing on the agenda? I thought it was.
The legal public hearing was held during the Plan Commission meeting,
Okay.
which was a week ago. That's the statutory public hearing moment. But as part of public comment, you're welcome to comment on the TID 9 this evening.
Okay. I'm opposed to basically any TID, so it's not specifically Octopi, but since they're the one before the board. I went the board to kind of look at the history of what's gone on with TIDs. So TID 2, the Arboretum Office Park TID, is a successful TID. TID 5 was the original downtown TID, not successful. So TID 2 is basically taking money from TID 2 and paying it to TID 5 to kind of retire the debt. And then the downtown had to make even another TID, TID 8, to try to rebuild the downtown. Now we've got TID 3, which was the original office park TID, and we're going with TID 9. And my point is that when you do TIDs on top of TIDs, you get tax increment going to developers for up to 40 years or more. And that means that taxpayers, regular taxpayers, are picking up costs that would have gone into schools, METC, and Dane County. So thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Todd, any others?
I'm watching. I don't see any at the moment.
Okay, give it about 5 more seconds. Okay, any more, Todd?
No.
Okay, then we're going to move on our agenda. Our first public hearing item of the night is public hearing and discussion action on a proposed amendment to the Village of Waunakee zoning code, in which section 133.16, restriction on rezoning for multifamily use, would be repealed from the zoning code. Kevin, are you introducing, or is Brian? Who's?
No, I can, and then Brian can chime in as well. But Chris, Brian and I talked about this. We think that both of these agenda items can go together. So we can give an introduction on both of these agenda items, and then you can hold the public hearings either together or back to back.
So knowing that we have a certain amount of time that people are allowed to speak, Brian, would that give them double time to speak then? I just want to make sure we do everything proper.
I think they would just need to identify what, I think they get to double time to the extent they want to speak on both of them, is what I would say. But you can't, for example, double up and say, all right, I want 6 minutes on the comp plan. But they are related, and so I would allow for a little bit of flexibility here, because there definitely is going to be some overlap between the two.
Okay, so you're putting numbers 1 and 2 together to move this forward. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think the thought process is it's going to make sense for the village board members and for the public to be able to explain agenda items 1 and 2 together, because they're related. Once the explanation is complete, if at that point in time you want to open up the first public hearing and then potentially close it and then open up the second public hearing, I guess that would be an appropriate approach if you'd like to take that.
Okay. Board members, do any of you see any problems with that? Please raise your hand if you do. Everybody looks okay. All right, proceed. So we'll be doing numbers 1 and 2. Should I read number 2 again, Brian?
Sure.
For the record, okay, so the number 2 would be public hearing and discussion action on proposed amendment to the 2017 Waunakee Westport Joint Comprehensive Plan, in which language addressing the ratio between the single-family housing and multifamily housing in the Village of Waunakee would be modified. Okay, go ahead, guys.
Yeah, just a quick introduction, and then I'll let Brian speak in more detail if he's interested or if the board wants to hear it. In terms of the first agenda item, it's really a change to our ordinance, which has a way of regulating our 75-25. And as we found out through the Blank Commission, we are the one and only in Dane County that regulates it that way in an ordinance. And probably there's very few, even in the state of Wisconsin, that regulate that percentage of multifamily to single family through the ordinance. If there is a way of monitoring that or regulating it or using it as a guideline or as a policy, it's done through the comprehensive plan. And so that's why these two agenda items go together, because what our comprehensive plan says is that we'll have regulations within our ordinance pertaining to that and how we're going to regulate the 75% single family to the 25% multifamily. So that's number one. And number two is really changes to the language with regard to the 75-25 in our comprehensive plan, in that it would provide, it's not changing the ratio. The ratio would continue to be 75-25, but gives the Plan Commission in making those decisions flexibility in considering really more of the project as a whole rather than on a strict interpretation on the 75-25. Brian, what other things you want to add to the discussion?
I think you covered it, Kevin. I mean, I'm certainly willing to answer any questions, but we simply want to get rid of the ordinance. I mean, we started looking at this ordinance a while back. We would be in a position right now where my recommendation is that we remove the ordinance from our code because it's going to be sufficient to have the policy in our comp plan amendment for purposes of, utilizing it in the village. If we weren't getting rid of the ordinance entirely, we would certainly be modifying it because that has some language within it that is maybe a little, would have need to be clarified. But again, I think the best approach is the way that Kevin's identified it, get rid of it, have the language in the comp plan. And I agree that if you look at the staff memo that was prepared on page 21 of your packet, one of the key issues for the new language in the comp plan is is more flexibility. And I guess the only thing I would add is this concept went to the CDA initially and then went to the Plan Commission, and it was at the Plan Commission for at least 2 meetings. And so there was a lot of thorough discussion. And then ultimately there was a recommendation to approve the comp plan amendment in the same form that we have it on page 23 of your packet.
Okay, so what I think we'll do at this point then is open up our public hearing for anyone who would like to address the village board on this issue. So please raise your hand and Todd will call you in.
I shall.
Can I clarify, is this the public hearing on repealing the village code section 133-16, or are we doing joint?
My understanding is we were just going to open up the public hearing on the first item first to see if anybody had some comments and then move on to the second public hearing after the first one has been closed.
Great. That was my understanding too, but I just want to make sure. Thanks.
Okay, for those then in attendance, if you're interested in speaking, click the raise hand button at the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. I think that's where the button is, right?
Okay, Todd, any hands at this point?
There are no hands.
Okay, then I'm going to close that public hearing. And Kevin and Brian, additional comments?
Not for me at this point regarding the public hearing number 2.
Okay, so are we acting on the number 1 right now, Brian, or are we just going to go to number 2?
I would wait because I think that your discussion, depending on if there's questions, that since they're related, I would wait to act on number 1 and first hold the public hearing on the comp plan amendment.
Okay, so we've held our first public hearing, and the second part of this, are we going right to the board members, or are we having another public hearing? I guess I just want to make sure I'm doing that right.
Public hearing.
Yeah, public hearing.
Open another public hearing. Okay, then I'm going to open up the public hearing for the second item at this time.
Chris, can you just read the second item again for those listening?
Yeah. Second item is public hearing and discussion action on proposed amendment to the 2017 Waunakee Westport Joint Comprehensive Plan, in which language addressing the ratio between single-family housing and multifamily housing in the village of Waunakee would be modified.
Okay, so we have that hearing open at the moment. Anybody wishing to speak, please click the raise hand button on your Zoom.
Okay, we'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Okay, any hands, Todd?
No hands.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll move on to our discussion phase. Board members, if you have comments, please raise your hand. Nyla, go ahead.
Okay, I was on the Housing Task Force, and I know that changing the zoning code was brought up, and it was decided that the ratio should be changed at that time. So I understand the reasoning for it, but I do, and I know we're not looking at changing the ratio. We're looking at changing the wording in the comprehensive plan. I have one concern, and I just want to voice it because I know that effect that we want to get out of this is to have more flexibility, to get more types of housing in town at different costs, different types, et cetera, et cetera. But in the back of my mind, I have to wonder if it could backfire because, you know, down the road, we won't have the same board. We may not have the same staff. Because there is more flexibility, we may get a different effect than what we want. And I just want to voice that. I will support this, but I do have this concern, and I did want the board to realize I have this concern. Thank you.
Thanks, Nyla. So we did have a lot of comments and discussion with regards to this topic at both the CDA and at our Plan Commission. I do have Plan Commission members here. Kristen, do you want to make any comments in regards to
Yeah,
this?
I mean, as a point of order, the Waunakee Housing Task Force did not make a decision on this, but passed on the decision to the Community Development Authority, said it needed to be looked at, but did not weigh in on what should be done with it. And that was delegated to the community, actually to the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission delegated it to the community, the CDA. So a lot of people have weighed in on this. I think that you know, if you go back and you review the meetings of the CDA and of the Plan Commission and listen to the discussion between the you know, people from very different viewpoints, from Jason Valerius, who is, you know, really honest and upfront about the 75-25 rule and the regulations we have, which can be exclusionary to the point of excluding based on income and race in a way that I don't think we want to as a community. It might ease the mind of that. We did discuss the fact that in the future, there will be different board members that turns over every 2 to 3 years or 2 to 4 years, and certainly over the long haul. So the best we can do now is kind of set a course for where we think we want to be, and trust that those who come after us are going to act in good faith as we're acting in good faith right now. I've spoken too much. I cede the floor.
Nope, that was great. So, Phil, any comments from you further?
Thank you. I think our concern was that our current policy kind of hamstrings each development. Each development is looked at and says, okay, you got to be 75-25 period. If we take that language out, we might have a development down the road that would go 70-30 and another one that would go 80-20, and we'd balance out. Our ultimate goal is to stick close to the 75-25, but not to hamstring a particular development from maybe because of senior housing or a combination of this and that, might get down into the 70-30 or perhaps even a little beyond that. That was all of our thoughts, I think. Is that about right, Kristen? Thank you.
I'd concur with both of those comments. Other board members, do you have any? Gary or Aaron? Just raise your hand if you do. If you don't, raise your hand.
I was just looking at that. I thought in the comp plan, they were talking about senior housing was exempt from the policy. Redevelopment projects and senior housing projects are exempt from this policy. So I mean, I'm just making that comment. Phil made a comment about, you know, senior housing. I think they're exempt. I don't think they're included in that.
Well, that's actually language that's in the existing comp plan. It was part of some drafts of documents that were taken to different meetings before and did not, and was taken out. I think when it comes to the redevelopment projects, I think that's, you know, in part because of the 4 paragraphs that are proposed that are going to substitute for the 1 paragraph that's being taken out really deals a lot with redevelopment projects. And I don't want to speak for the Plan Commission members who made the recommendation, but I think that there's also sufficient flexibility in here, specifically when you're looking at smaller developments where if it is senior housing, even though it may not be specifically exempt from the policy, that's where the flexibility is going to come into play. And it still would be something that the village could pursue if it makes sense from a planning standpoint.
Thanks, Brian. Aaron, did you have any comments?
I guess just one question or clarification. how does this retroactively like impact any developments that we have in the process or that have been approved that are still being built?
Brian, let me try and just start with that, and you can maybe finish up. Is that, Aaron, when we looked at all the projects that were pending in terms of multifamily and single family, and we added all those up in terms of what we see on the horizon, it still really meant that 75-25. It was more of a timing of when they would occur. If we go under the current ordinance, you'd have to wait for those single family to be built. So that every time you build 3 single family, you're allowed to build 1 multifamily. In this case, it's the flexibility in terms of when that can occur. So the timing of the multifamily could be ahead of the single family. But the best answer I have for you is that when we looked at all the projects that were pending throughout the village and single family and multifamily, we still were at that 75-25 ratio.
Okay.
All right, well, and I just have one comment really, and that's this is directed to all the board members so you know this, and I'm going to have Brian answer the question. So no pressure, Brian, with it. How many other communities have this ordinance currently, like ours is set up with the 75-25 in Dane County?
I am not aware of municipalities that have this in an ordinance. There are certainly municipalities that have this either as part of their comprehensive plan, or even if not in the comprehensive plan, as part of a policy that has been approved by the municipal body. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. So that's an important point. And I know that several people were on Plan Commission when we were doing the comprehensive plan and the board, and we really didn't look that closely at 75-25 because the consensus was that it was working in our community. But as we moved on and if we've gone on during this time with our housing task force and our CDA and the conversations that are going on within those, we've noticed that the policy does hurt certain pockets of what our housing potential could be for our more affordable housing, we'll say, or our missing middle housing that we don't maybe have as much of. So I was conflicted a little bit, frankly, on whether to go with this or not. And Kevin's point that he just made was what helped me to get past the finish line with it, which even with all the currently planned subdivisions and what we have in the docket for probably the next 10 years of development, we're still going to be at that 75-25 ratio. So we're really not moving that far off of it with this. So I would say that, you know, for those that are saying, why are we breaking a good thing? We're not really breaking a good thing. We're modifying it and we're hoping to include more things within. Not to hurt our community anyway. I think it's going to end up being a very good and positive change that we're making. So with that, if there's any other comments, please raise your hand. Kevin's got his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, just one more comment, just for avoidance of doubt, that this only applies to the Village of Waunakee. So it's got to be within the Village of Waunakee for this to apply. Because I know we're changing the joint comprehensive plan with the Waunakee and Westport. But if you look on page 22, it's clear, for avoidance of doubt, this will only apply to properties that are within the village.
Correct. Okay, thank you, Kevin. So board members, any additional questions, please raise your hand or comments. Okay, then let's take the first item, which is the recommendations on page 15. Do I have a motion or no motion?
Okay, I make a motion to approve the ordinance amending the 2017 Waunakee Westport Joint Comprehensive Plan, in which language addressing the ratio between single-family housing and multifamily housing in the Village of Waunakee as presented.
Okay, so just to be clarifying, Phil, that is for the second.
Oh, gosh.
Brian, we can't take those out of order, can we?
Sure, yeah, you can. I mean, they're related. So you have
Okay.
a motion on
We
the.
have a motion by Phil Williams. Do we have a second? Kristen Runge
Second.
with the second. Okay, any other comments? Okay, seeing no hands, call the question. Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Bill Willems,
Yes.
Erin Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg,
yes,
Nyla Fry,
yes,
Kristen Runge.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, now the second half of my motion is the motion to approve the ordinance amendment to repeal section 133-16 of the Waunakee Code of Ordinances relating to limits on multifamily housing.
Okay, a motion by Phil Willems. Do we have a second? Second by Kristen Runge.
Second.
Any other comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, call the question. Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Bill Willems,
Yes.
Erin Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg,
yes,
Nyla Fry.
yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Next public hearing we have is public hearing and discussion action on 2021 budget. Renee, are you introducing?
Yeah, I have another brief slide presentation, and then I think we would do the public hearing and then move to the board discussion. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everybody see that on the screen? The budget proposal PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. So some of these slides are ones you've seen before, but just a reminder of kind of where we're at in the process. So back on October 19th, we had our initial budget proposal presentation. Then on November 2nd, we had a non-required public hearing where we did take some comments. And then tonight is our official public hearing that is required by the statutes. And then following that, we will, the board will consider approval of the final budget. So in your packet, you may notice that the slide is slightly different. Today, I did receive information on the county levy. So now we do know the levies for all the other jurisdictions. So to recap, MATC, they're showing a decrease of about 1.25% in their levy. The school district has an increase of 1.24%, and the county levy is a decrease of 0.14%. So overall, those entities, it's pretty flat for what they are requesting to be put on our tax roll. There are still some, fairly significant other items that we are waiting for. Hopefully we will have them by the end of the week. I believe that's the statutory deadline. And those are the school property tax credit, the lottery credit, and then the first dollar credit. So those credits, the school property credit and the first dollar credit appear on every tax bill. The lottery credit only appears if it applies for that particular parcel. But those are direct deductions to the tax bill. So we can't quite predict what, we can't predict even what the tax rate will be for the tax bill as a whole until we get those credits, because they usually serve to offset and bring the tax bill down. These next two slides I'm gonna go through pretty quickly. This is where we were at initially in October with a 0% increase to the tax rate. And that meant that the village taxes would stay the same for the property values, assuming there was no change in the property values, the tax would be the same. At the November 2nd meeting, we did discuss two potential added positions, one in Public Works and one in the police department, and that would have an impact on the 2021 budget of just under 132,000. And that would be for a February 15th start for the Public Works and a May 1st start for the public or for the police department changes. And then it would be an additional 42,000 or so in the 2022 budget. So we talked through 3 potential options. And so now I've kind of put some numbers to those options so that you guys can see what that would mean to the budget and to the expenditure lines. So the first option was to increase the tax levy to cover those positions. And that would change the tax rate from a 0% increase to a 1.2% increase, bringing it up to 6.002 for the tax rate for the village. And that's about $26 for the average home in the village, valued at $370,000. The next option was to decrease some of our PAYGO capital funds to cover that. So it would be a decrease of the same amount. So that in effect would leave the tax rate the same with a 0% increase. But then I prorated, what the individual PAYGOs would lose out on so that you could see how that would impact it. So the parks capital would be reduced by 8,000, the trails would be reduced by 10,000, and street construction would be reduced by about 114,000, because that's by far the biggest number in our PAYGO funds. And just a reminder on this one, if we do decide to decrease the PAYGOs to cover this cost, because those staffing increases are an ongoing cost, I am predicting that we would have to decrease these PAYGOs probably again in 2022, where we think it'll be another tight budget year. So I don't think we'll be able to bring this back probably for a couple of years if we go this route. And then the third option was a combination. So I kind of came close to halfway in between for this one, weighted a little more toward the tax levy, but decreasing the PAYGOs by 49,500 and increasing the tax levy by 82,000 or so. So this would change the tax rate increase from 0% to 0.76%. We'd be at 5.976, and this would add then about $19 for the average home. And then you can see the PAYGOs would be reduced by quite a bit less if we went this combination approach. I don't know if it's best to do the public hearing next before questions, or because that's really all I have in terms of the slides, besides the action that you'll have to take at the very end.
I think that's perfect, Renee. And yes, I think it's time to open up the public hearing for this before any questions. So I will. Are you going to keep the screen up?
No, I'm going to. Yeah,
okay.
I took it down.
It helps me to see everybody easier when that's open. So, okay, Todd, I'm going to open up the public hearing. And if you'd like to comment on tonight's budget, please raise your hand at this time, and Todd will allow you in.
I did have one question, Renee, just in case. Can the board make modifications to the budget as it's proposed still? Is that within their ability here this evening?
Yeah, so I mean, we put together those, especially the combination approach. I mean, they could still decide, that they wanted to have a different percentage increase. Yeah, that was just, I had to kind of pick 3 scenarios. So that was what I came up with, but they would have discretion to move up or down within that.
Or they have discretion over other budgetary items, correct?
Oh, right, certainly, yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear on.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Right, if there's any other lines that they wanted to discuss or change.
Very good. With that said, any public attendees care to make comments this evening during the public hearing? Please click raise hand. There are no hands at the moment, Chris.
Okay, we'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay,
This was a similar reaction when the priest said, "Forever hold your peace." I had my wedding, so I was thankful for that one.
all right, so I'm going to close the public hearing then and turn it over to board members. If you have a question, please raise your hand for Renee at this time. Renee, Nyla, go ahead.
I don't know if this is for Renee or Todd, but at the last time we discussed this, I think I heard something about the building development this year would cover the cost of the new employee positions. Did I misunderstand that?
Well,
I don't recall.
Not this budget, but the following budget.
Yeah, we may have speculated because we experienced capacity as a result of in this year's budgeting process, and we are on pace. In fact, we've got 2 more single-family home permits as of now than we did last year at this time. So if we're similar in that valuation outcome, then I think what Renee and I were suggesting was that we would expect a similar amount of capacity. Renee, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that is true. Now, I don't know how closely we track the commercial permits, whether they are on pace as well. But right, we experienced just over 2% net new construction, and that allowed for the budget that we are looking at now. And so if we're similar, but I don't think it'll, it's not going to cover that 132,000, I don't think. But it's certainly, we might have a similar capacity to what we had this year to, do other things, give raises, or, help cover these.
But I think it's too early for us, Nyla, to assure you that the expense expected for these 2 positions in 2022 won't also require the village board to consider some aspect of levy increase.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, other board members, comments and/or questions, and then really we have to look at options 1, 2, or 3 is what we're going to decide upon. So I guess I'd look for all of your guidance as far as what your thoughts are with regards to those. So if nobody raises their hand, I will just start calling. Nyla, go ahead.
I would be comfortable with option number 3. I would hate to lower the budget for capital expenses any lower than that. I realize that there are many road reconstruction and repaving that needs to be done. And with that said, option 3 I'd be comfortable with, but I don't want to increase taxes any more than we absolutely need to for property taxpayers. This is going to be a hard year for a lot of people. So I don't know if, which way to go.
Okay. Aaron, how do you feel?
Echoing kind of what Nyla said, like, I guess I don't think any of us go out here wanting to raise taxes, but so option 3, I guess I like. I also think that, our commitment to parks and trails and streets is important, and public works, when we were looking at 2 weeks ago projects for the next 2 years, like we're already really trying to invest in that and make sure we have adequate funding for those. And I think parks and trails are very important. And as we're talking about an increase in both citizens, and right now we're seeing outdoor recreation with, more popular than ever, people trying to get outside. I think we need to honor our commitment to, ensuring our projects and, our priorities have adequate funding. So I think we're just gonna be playing catch up with falling behind on other projects in the future versus just going with option one now. But
Okay, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the use that people under this COVID world have, looked to the trails and looked to the parks to really try to expand their ability to get out and enjoy the community. I mean, it's been a real positive thing, I think, for people finding those trails. One thing that I've done a lot this year is I've gone to other communities. And in some cases, I think if I compare to Mount Horeb or to Forest or Verona, we're behind in the trails game. Our trails aren't to where our competing cities are. I'd hate to see any reduction in trails. So I just think that option one is a, pretty fiscally responsible decision for us to move forward with, and trying to keep our level of services where the people want them.
Thank you. Kristen Runge.
I'm going to echo Gary on this. I think the difference between 1 and 3 for a household with a $370,000 house is a $7 difference. So at a household level, I don't know that they're going to really feel much of a difference between $19 and $26. But when I look at $42,900 for street construction, I think that's probably street repairs on an entire residential street. I don't know though how far we can stretch $42,900 in road construction, but it sounds like a pretty big number to me. Likewise, trails, $3,000 feels like it would go pretty far on trails. So that small $7 savings to go with option 3, I don't know that we'd feel that on a household level, even in a tough financial year, but you might feel it in a neighborhood level if your street is the street that doesn't get repaired that year. So that's where I'm coming down on it.
Thank you. Phil Willems?
You betcha. I don't like to kick cans down the road. We've got to fix these streets. If we can't fall any farther behind, I'm for option 1, 100%. Okay, so interesting. I saw an article about Middleton, and if you look at Middleton, Middleton has a lot of parks, a lot of trails in their system, and I believe their vote or their what's proposed right now is that they're going to be stopping road construction on their 5-year plan. And there's a little bit of an uproar about that as streets get worse and worse and worse. And unfortunately, years ago, not to pile on any of our previous board members, but we kind of kicked the can, as Phil said, with our roads and our construction. And we just voted last year to increase that budget to catch up. And so to me, to reduce that right away after we just made that decision, I understand it's a difficult time right now for people out there. I'm in agreement with Kristen that I think it's reasonable to reduce us, by $60,000 to save $6 or $7. Well, it's $6 or $7. Some people are going to view that very differently than others, but I'm fully in favor of option 1. Assuming that we are all in agreement still that we need the public works and the additional employee in public works and police, each one. So if we're all in agreement that that is the case and we believe in that, I'm all for option 1 in doing this. So that said, we would need to come to an agreement on that right now. So I don't know if it's a motion that would be appropriate right now, or just, we can kind of do a show of hands of who wants to do where, and then make the motion. Go ahead.
I mean, I'll make a motion that we approve the resolution approving the 2021 Village of Waunakee budget with option 1.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, then we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments?
Just a quick question, Renee, is that sufficient for the motion, or is there a resolution that you have?
So the resolution is in the packet, but the motion is to approve that resolution. And so the way that Gary did it, I think, is what I was hoping for, to clarify which option was being entertained. 'Cause I
Okay,
kind of-
should his motion perhaps include and associated approve and related approval of the budget resolution? Because I don't think he mentioned the resolution. Is that correct? I just want to make sure that
I
we
thought he
address that.
I thought he read it from the packet, and it's a,
Yep.
I
He
read the
read it in
motion.
the packet with option number 1 tacked in on the end. So he talked about the resolution.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got a motion by Gary and a second by Phil. Is there any other comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Bill Willems,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg,
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And I will just once again echo, and I'm sure the board member will echo this. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Todd. Thank you, department heads, for working so hard on this budget. I know it wasn't easy, and just wanted to thank you for all the hard work and efforts that you put in. So I appreciate it.
thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
next on our list, license and permits. Discuss and take action on original alcohol beverage license application for Berkey's 2 LLC doing business as Buck and Honeys. Caitlin?
Included in your packet tonight was an application for liquor license for Buck and Honeys. They are proposing to take over the space previously occupied by Boston's Pizza. This would be a license application for the current licensing year of July 1, 2020, ending June 30th, 2021. I talked to Tom today, and he wanted to let you guys all know that the plans right now is to hopefully have Buck and Honeys up, open and operating by mid-December, but this is all COVID dependent. He also stated that when they do open right away, that might be for takeout only, but they are monitoring the COVID situation and hoping to be open by mid-December. With that, staff recommends approval of the license.
Okay, board members, any questions for Caitlin or look for a motion?
I'd like to say that I visited these people in their other operations, and I've dined inside, I've dined outside. I don't think they're noisy. I think they do take care of the noise outside very nicely. I'd like to make a motion for approval of the license, but I can't read that long paragraph. So I'd
That's
like
okay.
to make a motion to approve it as written.
Thanks, Bill.
I'll second.
You got a motion by Phil Williams, a second by Gary Hertzberg. Any other comments? Please raise your hand. Okay, roll call vote, please, Caitlin.
Bill Willems,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg,
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next we have under new business discussion and update regarding COVID-19 pandemic. Todd?
Yeah, we wanted to spend some time on this meeting here today with the village attorney on as well as the police chief in regards to enforcement related to the county and state orders. There's been some discussion in the community about this, and we wanted to provide some clarification and explanation of how we approach these situations. So in addition to that, Scott Russell is here from EMS. So maybe before we jump into the business pieces, Scott, would you be willing to provide a quick update on what you're seeing in the COVID world here? Oh, and I would also note, if you didn't watch it, Trustee Random and I recorded a presentation on Facebook last week, just about a little 10-minute video, and he gave some direct recommendations and updates to members of our community. So if you have a chance, jump back and watch that if you haven't yet. All right, Scott.
All right, thanks, Todd. Yeah, Dr. Random's actually going to have a little bit better update as far as hospitals go than I do. being kind of in the middle of it himself. Long and short of it, our hospitals are pretty much on the cusp of being full. They've been on different diversions. Their ICUs have been full, not full, full, not full, kind of off and on for the last week and a half or so. Wisconsin's definitely a hotbed here in the country. And while today we heard that Dane County is no longer considered a true hotspot within the state itself still is. And unfortunately, with the healthcare system we have locally, the rest of the state is sending patients down to us, which is also helping to overrun our system a little bit. The public messaging that keeps getting pushed out is wear your masks. I know they're going to talk about enforcement here soon, but wear your mask, socially distance, follow the guidelines that are out there. We all know it works. The healthcare professionals, they're in masks, goggles, and gloves, and they're staying safe out there treating these patients. So it definitely works. There's no denying that. A couple of things they did bring up today in our public safety meeting that they wanted to have put out there is with the holidays coming up. Thanksgiving, it's obviously not going to be a very popular thing to say, but really, really try to stay within the confines of your own household for Thanksgiving this year. Don't risk going out to other places, other family members. If you do want to have a bigger meeting, definitely, meet via Zoom, something like this. Just try to keep yourself safe. One thing that really hasn't come up much is Black Friday. A lot of your retailers are offering a lot of online options these days. My recommendation is to use those instead of go out to the stores. I know I keep saying that, but honestly, as much as we go out in the ambulances and see this stuff a lot, you're a lot more danger going out to a retail store than we are in the back of an ambulance. So definitely be careful there. And then the last one, kind of the most popular time in Wisconsin, we got deer hunting right around the corner. Looks like Adam's got his scruff ready to go. But there's a lot of people that go up and do deer camps, and by all means, this virus isn't going to avoid the deer camps. So make sure that you're smart about that. Keep some masks on. Obviously, out in the woods, it doesn't get much safer, but definitely when you get back into camp, be smart. Stay away from each other as much as possible. Keep your masks on. I wish there was better news, but it's going to be a long couple of months. There are some virus or some vaccine options coming out, as I'm sure you've all heard. Even though it will hit some of the most vulnerable people by the end of the year, we're looking at a good probably 4 to 5 months before we see any real dent in getting the public truly vaccinated. That's really all about all that I have. Thanks, Todd.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I'm disappointed you didn't mention my scruff. This is 3 weeks. That's not bad, is it?
I had to start No Shave November in September, so we're working on.
Any questions for Scott before he jumps off?
Thank you,
Okay.
Scott.
Quickly, at a staff level, I think some of you know we've had a few staff members with positive results, and we've also had numerous staff members with different aspect of close contact that have sent them into a quarantine status for a time. So we're definitely seeing that as a reality within the workforce. So with that, I did want to turn it over to Adam and Brian to chat about enforcement out in the community as we're hearing reports. Oh, Caitlin, did you have something you wanted to add? I just saw you pop in.
I just wanted to give a quick update on Village Hall operations since we're transitioning away from election being open. So just a quick update regarding Village Hall operations. We remain open. So we've shut down Village Hall. We were open during in-person absentee voting. Our doors were open for the public to come in. We have now gone back to remaining open by appointment only, and our phones are monitored Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 4:15, and Friday from 7 a.m. till noon. If someone needs to make an appointment or a phone call with us, the phone tree has been updated and the message has been updated to instruct people to leave messages and that we get back to them as soon as possible. But just wanted to give the Village Board that update on our operations at Village Hall.
And similar to operate with operations in mind, Caitlin and I, following a Dane County Public Health memo a week or two ago, they stressed at a higher level that employees, if whenever practical, do allow employees to work remote when it's effective. So we reiterated that statement to our department heads and to and them to our employees, that where remote working is possible, we're encouraging that for our workforce. With that, now Adam and Brian, are you ready? All right, fill us in, guys, on enforcement.
You want me to go first, Brian?
Sure, Chief.
Yeah, just I think a couple weeks ago, we shared an email, or Todd shared an email with you guys just on what our enforcement efforts have been. Really, as far as complaint-driven calls for service, we have not had very many regarding violations of the order. I think that's for a number of reasons, likely public health's push to contact them when you see violations going on. They really didn't want, police enforcing the mask rules or excuse me, complainants or people calling with violations to call the police directly. They wanted that to go to public health. So we really haven't seen very many complaints coming in directly to the police department. That being said, we certainly have been working very closely with public health. We talk with them regularly, whether that's conference calls through the Chiefs Association, just reaching out to them for our own questions when they pop up. I know they have gotten a number of complaints on a few things, and they're certainly working through that. I know the question has come up about, whether or not the village would need an ordinance, and Brian can certainly touch on the legalities of that. When that came up, I did reach out to all the police departments in the county. I received 13 replies. Really, every one of them is working directly with public health from an enforcement standpoint, and letting them take the lead really at their request. They've requested to take the lead on the enforcement part. They'll reach out to law enforcement if needed, and that has kind of been the route. None of those agencies have taken a direct writing citation approach to the violations. They handle it at different levels. Some of them will just refer directly to public health and they'll stay out of it completely. We've gone probably one step further in that if we do receive a call, we will go to the business. We will make our observations. We'll talk to the business owner about the complaint, what the current order is, what they should be doing. We'll document that and we'll forward that to public health for their review. I think it's a pretty good approach. That's one central system then that's receiving all the complaints and making sure that any enforcement action, really, to be honest, is fair and equitable throughout the county, as they're kind of been the lead agency that have put the order out and taken the lead on the enforcement part of it. So again, that doesn't mean that there's not violations going on in the village. We just haven't seen a high call volume at the police department regarding public health violations.
Oh, and so I agree with everything the chief said, and that's the same thing that I'm hearing for all municipalities in Dane County, that Dane County Public Health is the one that's taking the enforcement lead. I think a lot of that has to do with what Chief said about kind of having a central system where you wouldn't want to have a situation where you have for a particular business having the local municipal police department and Dane County Health contacting the same business and potentially providing different information. I think that's one of the reasons why Dane County Health wants to take the lead. When it comes to ordinances, so I'm just going to read something that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities issued probably in about May. And I'll just provide a little bit more information after I read this, but this is consistent with my read of the statutes. And two key things to take into consideration for purposes of in Dane County. The first is the village of Waunakee itself does not have its own local health department. And by Wisconsin statutes, if we did not have our own local health department on or before 1994, we do not have the statutory power to create a local health department. What's also key is we have Dane County, in conjunction with the city of Madison, does have a local health department. And Dane County has issued some, obviously some rules regarding COVID and safer at home issues. So let me just read this to you. Municipalities without a health department must abide by any safer at home restrictions imposed by the county health officer. If the county health officer has not issued a county safer at home order, municipal policymakers have the discretion to issue safer at home orders to prevent or minimize the spread of COVID-19 within their communities pursuant to their emergency powers under Chapter 323 of the statutes. So if there comes to be a time where Dane County no longer has safer at home orders, the village's power would be that we could adopt some rules and regulations pursuant to our emergency powers. And if you recall, I think in at least 3 occasions, we have adopted resolutions at the village board level related to these emergency powers. They have not gotten into specific safer at home orders because at the time that we've adopted these resolutions, either the state of Wisconsin or Dane County already had in place the safer at home orders. But so as long as to sum up, as long as Dane County has a safer at home order, that's what we must abide by. And I agree with the way that Chief has kind of described how enforcement is being handled within the county.
And just to add to that, I mean, we have certainly encouraged people to follow the order. We understand the importance of it. Recently, we reached out to the chamber and kind of connected them with public health. I believe public health is going to have a Zoom meeting with the chamber and the businesses on Thursday. Really is kind of a proactive approach and opportunity for that group of businesses to get some clarity if needed, make sure all their questions are answered. So hopefully they can better enforce the public health rules well. I think the goal for everybody is to find ways to survive the challenging time, and I think that'll be a benefit as well when that happens. So.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for Adam or Brian? So I don't have any questions, but go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to add in, we also have Eric from the library is here. Caitlin is still on, Kevin and Renee, if you have, and Sue, I see Sue McDade is here too, if you have questions about other departmental functions or operations.
Okay, before I start, any board members that have questions for any of those individuals?
I don't have a question, but a comment. This is the first board meeting we've had since the election, and I just wanted to commend Caitlin and Todd and the village staff for running such a fantastic election in a busy year in the middle of a pandemic, and keeping everybody safe in doing so. So kind of related to what we're talking about, the safety measures that went into that, but thank you guys.
Thank you. Caitlin's team did a great job.
Everybody on the Zoom should agree with that, and if they don't, they just weren't watching or understanding everything that was going on, unfortunately. So I don't have any questions, but I have some comments I wanted to make, and I told Caitlin and Todd that I wanted to make an announcement this evening, and what part of the agenda, could I just have this? And it's regarding this topic. So Todd was wondering what's this, that I want to make for an announcement.
You like to do that just to tease us.
Yeah, the announcement is very simple to me. We've unfortunately in the country had an absent leader here in the last several weeks with regards to COVID. And in the absence of the leadership there, it's incumbent upon us as people to take care of this. And I'm going to use a little analogy that I used when I was a school teacher. I taught health to 1st through 6th graders. And one of the very first classes I taught germs and how germs are spread. And the activity that we did was all the kids closed their eyes. And I hope people are watching this because I think they're just not getting it. And this is something that a 1st grader can understand. Okay, so germs are spread. You can get it through your eyes, your mouth, your ears, your nose. That's the main area where we get them. But it also can be through a cut if we have an open wound on ourselves. All right, so what I would do is I took a can of Lysol. And with that can of Lysol, I had the kids with their eyes closed. All right, and I said, when you smell something, I want you to put your hand up. So I would spray that can in front of the room. Guess which kids put their hands up first? Well, the ones that were closest to me, but all of them ended up putting their hand up because they all smelled it. It's the same with this virus. So when we are expelling anything out, sneeze or whatever else, the closest people to us are more than likely going to get that. That's why it's important that we sneeze properly and do all the other things. That's what I would teach them. That's how this virus is spread and why it's so important that we are taking every precaution necessary. All right, I had a resident reach out to us. What can we do from a law enforcement perspective? Really, the law enforcement has to come from us as people with one another. It's why we want to wear the masks. It's why we want to do everything that we can to abide by social distancing and all the rules that have been laid out for us. For those of you in the public, and this is near and dear to me now. I'm going to read you something that I received from my niece. For those that say that kids don't get impacted by this. So my niece debated posting this. She put it on Facebook. I got it in an email. I debated posting this, but thought it would change one person's habits. It may be worth it. Unfortunately, our 3-year-old was exposed at daycare after they met up for Halloween with their cousins, an innocent and small gathering. We found out one of the cousins tested positive on Tuesday. By Saturday, my daughter was sleeping most of the day, spiked a fever of 104, and had febrile, I don't know if I'm saying that right, febrile seizure and stopped breathing. The 4 minutes it took for the ambulance to get here was the longest moment in my life. No one should have to see their child blue and limp in their arms. Please consider your holiday plans for Thanksgiving and make smart decisions, mask up, and make sure you're social distancing. Stay within your own group. Everybody can be impacted by this. We need to protect one another and take the correct actions. For those in the public that say we can't damage our economy, the worst thing we can do is not get this under control, because that's going to damage our economy even further. So I implore everybody out there who may see this, if Roberta reports it, please right now, our systems are being overloaded. Dr. Random is not here tonight because he couldn't be, because our healthcare workers are getting sick right now. And not having enough of them means that we have another issue on our hand. Not having enough beds for people to go to, another issue on our hand. And all those things are happening right now. So if I seem like I'm lecturing right now because I feel that someone has to speak out to our population with simple things to understand how this is spread and what we can do to stop it. Thank you for all our healthcare workers. Thank you for being on here tonight. Dr. Random couldn't be here, like Scott was saying that Dr. Random would give a better update for the hospitals. He couldn't even be here. That's the situation we have in our hospitals. So thank you for listening. Hopefully you're not thinking I'm preaching, but I think it's important to be set out into the population right now because we're in that situation. It's the worst it's been. And as Scott said, it's going to be a bad couple months here. So thank you. Okay, Todd, anything else within this topic?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. All right. Now I got so fired up, I actually lost my agenda here. So hold on one second. All right, then next item we have is discuss and take action on proposed resolution approving an amendment to the project plan and boundaries of tax increment number 9. Who's introducing, Todd?
Yeah, I can introduce, and certainly tag teaming with Todd Taves, our financial advisor from Ellers, who is on here with us. Good evening, Todd. And certainly along in the process, Kevin has been closely involved, Renee, Caitlin, and Brian Kleinmeyer as well. So as needed, the rest of us can chime in. But maybe Todd, as you get going, if you could first review the actions to date on this item, I think that would help kind of set the stage for what then is in front for the board. So if you could review what the JRB and the Plan Commission has done first, and then jump into your info to share. And I would also add the applicant is on, Isaac Shwaki from Octopi, and Kate Crowley, a consultant from Baker Tilly, who is working with Isaac and Octopi on their proposals. So when you desire, I assume they're gonna hope to share some comments in addition to Todd's.
So in terms of procedure, the process of amending the district is 4 steps. It starts with the Organizational Joint Review Board, which we held a couple of weeks ago, then went to the Plan Commission last week, where it was the subject of a public hearing, and now sits before you this evening. Should you elect to proceed with this amendment, it would go to the Joint Review Board again next Tuesday for a final decision. So that's where we're at in terms of the procedure. I'm going to share my screen and just hit a couple highlights on the project plan document. So this amendment to tax incremental district number 9 would be for 2 purposes. The first purpose would be to add a single parcel to the district. So this is existing TID number 9, originally created a few years ago for the Tormac project that did not proceed, and is now the proposed site of the warehouse expansion for Octopi.
Todd, were you hoping to have a screen shared at the moment?
I am. Can you not see it?
Nothing's on right now.
All right. One moment.
Well, except
please.
for everybody. There we go.
That better?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. So again, this is existing TID number 9. This is again was the Tormac TID, and this amendment would add the parcel located here to the district, which is the site of the existing Octopi facility, with also expansion land located to the south and west where the proposed brewery expansion would occur. So that would be the first part of this amendment. The second part of the amendment would be to add to the list of project costs within the district that are expected to be undertaken. So when the original district was put together, the sole cost was an incentive to be paid to Tormac on a pay-as-you-go basis, expected in the amount of $620,000. So now we're dealing with 2 parcels, a significantly larger project. The proposed incentive is $2,975,000. Additionally, kind of a minor item, there was no administrative expenses included in the original plan, but as a matter of course, you will always have those types of expenses. So we've taken the opportunity to add those in. So all told, the project costs within the district would increase under this amendment from $620,000 to just over $3 million. In terms of the financial projections included within the plan, the investment itself is substantially larger than the figures we're showing here, because this reflects only the taxable real estate. The actual investment by the company would be in excess of $60 million. However, much of that takes the form of machinery and equipment that is tax exempt. So of the portions that are taxable, which would basically be the buildings, the brewery expansion, and then the warehouse across the street, we've estimated that the value of those facilities once completed would be approximately $20.6 million. That $20.6 million, once it's fully online, which would be expected as of January 1st, 2022, would in the year 2023 result in the collection of roughly $418,000 in tax increment based on the current rate, which we've assumed to remain constant. We've also assumed that the
Hey,
value.
Todd, one quick thing. Could you zoom in on your slides a little bit? I think it'll be easier for people to see within the presentation.
That better?
Yeah, if you could even go in a couple more clicks, thank you.
Certainly. So again, roughly $418,000 a year. The district is already in the 3rd year of its tax collection cycle. And as a result, we've got roughly 17 years left. And over that time frame, if the district were to remain open for its entire life, we would expect to collect roughly $7.2 million. When we look at that from a cash flow standpoint, so we've got that same $7.2 million coming in on the left-hand side. That would be the sole revenue for the district. And again, the incentive requested is $2,975,000. We have divided that into 2 components, $1,190,000 for the brewery expansion, $1,785,000 for the warehouse. So those 2 allocations would be associated with the individual projects. So to receive the full amount, both projects would need to proceed. And in addition to the minor administrative expenses, what we would project is that by the year 2030, there would be enough funds accumulated within the district's balance to pay off the balance of that municipal revenue obligation. And when I say municipal revenue obligation, what we're talking about is pay as you go. So in other words, the village would not borrow any money on the front end. What you would be doing is, as the tax increments are collected, and only to the extent that they're collected, you would be paying a portion of that back to the company to defray expenses related with construction of the real estate facilities. So again, while the district could remain open, to the year 2039. We are projecting that it would be able to close within 10 years in the year 2030.
Quick note, Todd, if I can jump in regarding that, the level of incentive that is discussed here, and maybe just for clarification purposes. This evening, what we're talking about is the structure of the project plan amendment that kind of establishes the mechanism by which the village could issue a development agreement that could guarantee or to grant an MRO. You're not tonight considering the development agreement. So, and maybe Todd, you can touch on the fact that your action tonight doesn't set in stone the parameters of this of the MRO here. That would be a subsequent discussion by the village board with the development agreement. Brian Kleinmeyer has already begun crafting the document. But I guess my question for Todd is, let's say the project plan is approved here tonight, Todd, and then by the joint review board. Can the resulting deal that the village board executes with Octopi differ from the terms that are identified here in the project plan draft?
Yes, and while we're on this page, that's what this footnote alludes to right here. That while this is crafted around the request as it's been made to the village, it's understood that ultimately the development agreement is what will specify in detail what the level of incentive is and the terms and conditions related to that. So this is for purposes of illustration and assessing financial feasibility and as a required element of the project plan.
Okay, thanks.
The last thing I would just touch on before I stop my comments is there was comments made during the public comment section as to the but-for, and as was correctly indicated, the but-for is ultimately the crux of tax incremental financing. In other words, would the project as proposed occur without it? Now, there is no statutory definition or criteria for but-for. It's ultimately a judgment call by the Joint Review Board. As part of our analysis, what we attempted to do is, to the extent that you can, to provide some analytical framework for making that assessment. So granted, it's not perfect, but it's a way we can put numbers to that question. But ultimately, it's a combination of taking into totality all the factors and considerations and making that judgment based on the totality. So the empirical part of this is that the tax increment district is proposed to be amended to provide an incentive to allow the real estate component of the project to proceed. So in other words, the MRO, the payments would be allocated to that part of the project. And what we did is we looked at the cash flow returns based on the rents that were proposed, which we've determined to be market rate. And as was mentioned in the public comments, without the TIF incentive, those are negative returns and they turn slightly positive once they're provided, which makes the project better. So that to the extent we can, we have determined that it is likely that element of the project would not proceed, but for the provision of the TIF. And again, that is what the TIF is incenting, is it's this aspect of the project. Last part of this, just so everyone is clear, as I mentioned, the village would be borrowing no money for this. However, the company would need to raise the capital on the front end to fill their gap. So the $2,975,000, and again, this is, as Todd pointed out, subject to the development agreement, but based on the numbers that we're utilizing, is that $2,975,000, when you consider that interest has got to be paid on the loan the company would receive, and that the lender will further discount that future stream of revenues, given that the revenues are going to vary from year to year based on tax rate and valuations, really monetizes back to $1,850,000 on the front end. So the actual request that the village received was for $1,850,000 in incentive payments, but because again of the interest and the discounting over time, $2,975,000 in payments would be necessary to gather that amount of money on the front end. So that's the highlights of the plan, and I'll certainly answer other questions you may have, but I'll stop there, Todd.
So I'll go right from there. Brian Kleinmeyer, do you have any comments in regards to this?
Not any comments right now. I mean, I'm certainly available to answer any questions that you all might have.
Okay, perfect. So as I always do, I'm going to go around the board and see if you have questions and or comments with regards to this project, and whether or not, not whether or not, but just get your comments at this time. Kristen Runge, I'm going to start with you.
My turn to go first, huh? Yeah, I'm in favor of the project. I think there are relatively few tools that we have in economic development to help businesses grow and expand. What put me in the positive category is the number of living wage jobs that are connected to it, and the fact that this is projected at 10 years to be paid back. So it's, in my opinion, a relatively short time that we're tying up the tax increment for this. But that's just my opinion, so.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or just comments? Okay, Phil Willems.
I'm not sure yet. I like the company. I like what's going on. I hear. I know that the restructuring it. There's going to be ownership of the building, and then there's going to be a rental unit. But aren't they the same thing? Just organized a little bit different. I really have negative emotions on giving up all the increment. I think I'd like to meet them halfway, if even that far. I'm sorry, just not sold on it all the way.
And Isaac is here, so if you have questions for him, we can obviously direct them at him if you have a question for him, as well as Kate. Gary Hertzberg.
Yeah, I probably am more in line with Kristen's comments. One of my concerns a little bit as I've looked at that, and the development will be right to the south of that, the residential development. And I sometimes get concerned that, what can we do to protect residential, even though they know that it's a business park that they're building next to. If Isaac's going to have a lot of activity there, which I'm sure he is there something that we could require Isaac maybe to do? And that might be, I've always liked the idea of putting trees in for screening. It sounds like a simple thing, yet I don't like the idea of fences. I think that's doesn't really block the noise as well, and probably not that aesthetic. And maybe Kevin can add to this a little bit. He might know the situation better. I'm just concerned that we also protect the residents that are going to move into that area, because we want Isaac's business to be very successful and very busy. But maybe there's something we can request as part of this TIF that would provide kind of a natural barrier that might protect that area a little bit.
Okay, so I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to comment on that one, but I'll just say, Carrie, that Isaac was there first before that subdivision was proposed, and the developer of that subdivision knew that they were building right on our manufacturing business sector. And I think there are plans for that to take place through berming and various other things. That would be something I think that would be a good thing for Isaac to be talking with the developer about. But that's just mine, and I think that's already occurring. But if anybody wants to weigh in on that, Kevin, maybe you could weigh in on that, because that's been a discussion. Kevin Even, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
And Chris, I think that's something we have spent some time on at the Plan Commission level. And I think the way you pointed out that the industrial park was there first, and we had clear direction to developer that required all those homes that are adjacent to and even one off across the street are put on notice that there's going to be industrial type uses that back up. because of where this is in that drainage way, really, if you look at the site plan, the fencing is really the only viable option. There's not really room in terms of providing a buffer on Isaac's land. He's really he's pushing to the limit of what he can fit on there in order for his operation to work. In fact, as part of the plan, he had to move the parking lot to the other side of the street in order to accommodate it. So I think that's a conversation more at the plan commission level. And I know that there were some trees there and they weren't planted in the exact correct location. So now I know they got moved, but I know there's going to be some fencing and some trees that are going to be on the residential side that should help, provide a buffer. And I think that the Tinneries have done a good job in terms of providing that buffer, of providing these potential for these out structures, or shed structures or garage structures that will create a courtyard between that structure and the residential house, so to give it some more separation. So I think the short answer is that's a plan commission issue, and I think they continue to work through that.
Thanks, Gary. I didn't mean to jump on you either. I just wanted to share that information out there to you about that has been a topic that we've discussed. Erin Moran.
That's me. Yeah, I guess I don't love the idea of this, but I agree with Kristen. It's our only tools, of our few tools. And I gain more support for this by the fact that it the projected close of 2030. I find that reassuring, and I think that's a positive thing. So no questions right now, but
okay, thank you. And Nyla, sorry.
Yes. Hi. Okay, first of all, I'm concerned about the amount of the request has gone up substantially from the original request. I think Isaac's done a good job from what I hear. I've never been out to Octopi, but everything I hear great things about him and what he's doing out there. But I am concerned about the amount of the request that he's asking. I also had a business person call me who was very concerned about any business that grows too much, too fast. And the but-for test, it seems to me like the but-for test is like an elastic rubber band that gets stretched and stretched and stretched to meet anything that you can find for a but-for test. And as far as job creation, for the number of jobs that will be created, it's an awful lot of money for the few jobs that I see. And the proposal doesn't incorporate the number of jobs created or any jobs created to receive any funding. And then the last thing, the village has no control over this, but I wish somehow the municipalities in the county would work to get it on our tax bills, the same as Grant County does, so people know exactly what TIF funding is costing them. If the mystery is taken away pertaining to TIF funding, it may be better accepted. I think it's the not understanding it, the mystery of not knowing what it's costing us, that gives it such a negative outlook. And I know that's nothing within our municipalities that we can do, but I think it's something we should work on with other municipalities to get that listed on our tax bills. That's basically my thoughts. I hope that Isaac continues doing as well as he has. But I'm just surprised that the amount went up so far from the first request to now. That's it.
Nyla, when you say the first request, do you mean when they originally opened their doors?
No. When we first had the meeting, the first closed session pertaining to this, it was considerably less, wasn't it, or not?
Yeah, to clarify and perhaps either Todd or even Isaac can jump on to clarify. The project was much smaller at the
Correct.
time, therefore the request was smaller amidst the time. And the reason that that request or that process paused at that moment was because new business opportunities came to Isaac that fully changed the scope and scale of the project, which is when it went almost more than doubled, if not perhaps tripled, in financial investment. So I'm assuming that's accurate. Todd, Taves, or Isaac, did I miss anything to that?
No, I don't know if I can add something, Todd. Appreciate it.
Chris, did you want to get around the village board first, or did you want Isaac to chime in now?
I actually think I'm the only one that's left, but Isaac, I'll let you pipe in before I speak. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just wanted to answer some of the questions that have been brought by the board. First is thank you for having us here. We really appreciate everything you've done for us. Like we said in all the meetings, if we wasn't for a lot of people helping out, including TIF, WDC, WBD, etc., this project would have never happened, and I would have still had a business plan in my hand and nothing created. And because of your help, we've been able to grow a business in pretty great sense of the word, creating about 100 full-time employee jobs in Waunakee, all well paid, above market rate. Our starting salaries anywhere from $18 to $20 an hour plus full incentives. So this has been a dream become a reality. And like I said, we just appreciate all the help you've done for us. So just to answer a few of the questions, we've been in talks with the developer behind us. I met with them personally last week, and we're just going to work together to make sure that what we do and they do works for both of us, for the people that are going to live there and for our operations. We have I would say a pretty decent relationship, and I think we're both open to making sure that things work out. He already planted a lot of trees, Gary, and I think if we need to plant more trees, we'll do that, or if we need to put some fencing, we'll definitely do that. To answer Nyla's questions, one is, yes, the amount went up. The project went from $20 million for a warehouse. Now we're going to do a $68 million warehouse plus canning line expansion. So the project went up significantly, almost more than 3 times the size from the initial request. The other one is, like I said, the TIF is not, we don't have jobs, but we have about 25 job openings right now, and we plan to add another 40 jobs on top of that in the next 3 years. So hopefully by the time we're fully built in 2 years, we'll have about 140 to 150 full-time jobs out of Octopi, which is something that I really want to get to, and that's my goal. As we grow, we're going to have to hire more people. And the other one that we've talked about a few times, the TIF is a pay-as-you-go, is if we don't build or don't deliver, we don't get anything. And it's up to us to make sure that we build it up what the planning commission told us that we could do, and we do a really good job on the real estate. And as long as we do that, we will pay the taxes, then we will get them back. Up to 9 years, it should get paid back. So if we don't do it, there's no cost to any of the residents or the village or any of the people that are paying taxes. If anybody has any questions, please, we'd be happy to answer any of them.
So before I start with all the things that I'm going to say, which is quite a few, Isaac, what would happen if you don't get this?
Most likely, I would say 100% the project doesn't happen, or I would just have to wait. And in 3 years, if I lose the opportunity, I don't know if the opportunity is going to be there. And I'm being 100% honest. Right now, the opportunity is here. If I do it, we'll get it. In 2 or 3 years, it might not be there anymore. My clients are going to look somewhere else.
What if is it even a possibility to scale the project by $3 million so you wouldn't need the TIF?
We tried, but we need, this is to max our scale in the next few years. We've tried each and every way to make it lower, but honestly with COVID, actually our costs have gone up. So from the first time we proposed this new expansion to now, our project has gone up for about $3 more million up. And we hope that it stays there. But I would say the longer we delay this, the higher probability of the project going up in price.
Okay, so TIF is an interesting topic. All of the board members should feel that way. It's complicated to a certain degree, yet easy in other respects. And I'm a little disappointed tonight, frankly. And I'm one of those people that our community is schools. My wife is a school teacher. I mentioned earlier, I used to be a school teacher. I know many of the teachers within the community and school district. And before we've even discussed this tonight, our school board president came on and basically inferred that the school district's not going to back this before we had a chance to discuss. I don't want to be at odds with the school district, not in any way, shape, or form. But it's disappointing to me before we even have gotten to the JRB that it's gone through here, where the school district could weigh in, that it happened tonight before we had a chance to discuss. So to that, I'm a little disappointed in that. Second, with regards to this TIF request, no matter what we do, we're going to have a certain segment of our population that philosophically just does not agree with what TIF is. And it's important for all of you to know that going into it. It doesn't matter what the situation is. If I ask right now, how long has the land been sitting there in that industrial park? Is it over 20 years, 25 years? Do we know that, Todd?
I'm not sure which Todd, but Kevin, when was that business park platted?
TID was created in 2000.
So 20 years, basically. So that land's been sitting there doing nothing from a taxable perspective for 20 years. And we have an opportunity right now with one of our existing businesses, and it's very difficult to attract businesses right now in the climate it is. We have one of our existing businesses that wants to do a very large expansion, and they're doing well. And they want to even be doing better than what they are. Will that tax base generated help us in the future? You know, is this a long haul company? I'm looking at, do I believe in Isaac? Do I believe this company is going to be there in the future? All right, that we're willing to invest tax dollars for it. And I struggled pretty heavily with this, with the but-for test. Frankly, and that's where my questions come from with Isaac about this. Because I want to make sure with my vote that I am protecting the taxpayers and I'm looking at their interests. And those tax dollars, and I was with our plan commission meeting, I asked our school board, our school board finance, the finance person for our school district, what this means. And the answer is $2,000 to the town of Westport residents. Not just a resident, $2,000 for the entire town, for the school district, that they're going to have to pay more. Not that the school district is going to lose any additional revenue, but $2,000 is what the town of Westport's going to have to put in the residents there. Now, when it comes up due and it closes, it'll change, and all of a sudden they're going to get a break from it as a result of it. But in reality, if this doesn't happen and the land sits there for 20 years, this money doesn't come in either way from a tax revenue standpoint. And again, I'm struggling with the but-for. I want to make sure that I'm confident with that. And that to me is the most important thing. It's important to me that the school district is healthy. I don't necessarily agree that this is going to impact the school based on what I've been told from Steve Summers at school district. And then looking at the numbers and calculations that I asked him to do for us. So that's just accurate. The last question I have for Isaac, and it's a concerning thing to me because I also have another school board member who's questioning whether or not I have a conflict of interest. And I'm going to say this right in public right now to Isaac. Isaac, have we had any conversations with regards to banking?
No, zero.
Okay. The bank you've been working with is the one from the beginning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And to me, I have not had any conversations with Isaac. I'm stating that with regards to financing in any way, shape, or form through our bank. I want that to be cleared out there to it. And any decision I make would not be in regards to what my bank, I'm doing my decisions based on the village of Waunakee and what this is going to do for us, both positively or potentially negatively. So I'm basing the decision on that. To suggest the other thing is just somebody that I have a hard time with doing that in public and challenging. So our decision really tonight is we're not doing, as Todd said, the project plan tonight. We're looking at, do we want this to move forward and modify the land and the barriers of the TIF, correct, Todd? Todd Taves, that's correct, right?
Correct. This adds the parcel. It provides the ability to spend dollars within that added parcel.
But
And then
it
from
also includes the full scope of the project plan language. What I had clarified you're not doing is a development agreement tonight.
Correct. That's
Okay.
what I meant. Thank you for saying that. So my opinion in regards to this is I think this is a project that's worth us looking at very seriously. And I think this is good for our community. If I went to other communities right now and said, you know, you've got a company that's, you know, just starting out and you gave them a little bit money to get going, and all of a sudden they want to have a full $100 million investment into the community, how many communities get that opportunity? Especially with one that's thriving, potentially, that is going to add more jobs. Yeah, it's not a ton more jobs, but I will say that Isaac not only met, but far exceeded the expectations we had the first time around with our TIF, with the amount of employees that they have. So to me, I'm in support of this TIF for that reason. And I want to make it clear that I support our schools as well. And, you know, they have tough decisions that I've taken a stance not to interfere with anything the school is as the village president. And, you know, when things do cross paths, it's important that we have open conversation about it. So I will be supporting this tonight and hoping that it moves forward and gets approved. Any other comments from folks?
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead, Kristen.
I'm going to put my Economic Development Administration University Center hat on and say, with regards to jobs, this is something we hammer again and again and again when we go out and we talk to communities, that the way that you grow jobs in your communities is by growing entrepreneurs. You never attract an Epic. You never attract a new Glarus. There is not enough tax money or incentive in the world to get a company like that to come to your community. You have to find an entrepreneur that is willing to call your community home when they're small and grow their business and ultimately employ more than the initial 1, 2, 3 people that we start at. So this is, in the view of what I do professionally, the way it's supposed to work, that relationship between the community and the entrepreneur ultimately grows a business, and that business remains in that community, and everybody together flourishes. So with that, I'll get down off my education soapbox. And
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so tonight, I guess we're looking at
So Chris, you have a recommended motion on page 46 of your packet, and that the resolution that is referring to is the 3-page resolution that is on pages 52, 53, and 54 of your packet. And as like both Todd Schmidt and Todd Taves have said, this relates to the approval of the project plan and the other approvals contained within that resolution. You are not approving a development agreement as part of any motion that you make tonight.
okay, so one other thing that we need, okay, go ahead, Gary.
If you have another thing to add before my motion, you can go ahead, Chris.
No, one of the things that we can consider is Phil brought it up, I believe, with, you know, can we reduce this amount of ask? And I don't want to just gloss over that. I mean, that's something that where we could, Ryan, is that not part of what we should be discussing?
Well, I would just say, I think it's probably more appropriate as part of a discussion regarding the development agreement. If you approve, for example, if you approve the project plan as it's been presented to you, that does not bind you to provide the incentive at the percentage level that's identified in there. I would say that allowing for the discussion when the development agreement comes forward, you maintain your flexibility that's built into the project plan right now.
Okay, Phil, I just didn't want you to feel ignored that didn't get answered. So based on my response, is that acceptable to you?
Chris, I'll just say that thank you, Kristen, for mentioning New Glarus. I'm well aware of how New Glarus's brewery happened, and there's a lot of people in New Glarus that bought shares in that. The whole town bought into that thing. And yes, they helped an entrepreneur develop. In this case, I'm looking for the carrot for the taxpayers right now. And if they give all this incentive, this increment, at the end of it, what do they get? They don't have any ownership or anything like that, but I'd just like to see something. I just don't know how to wrap myself around all this yet, but I don't see anything for the taxpayers other than waiting. And that's what I'm having a problem with. And I like the brewery. I like Isaac. I just, I don't know how to make it more of a community thing.
Okay, Gary, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to move to approve the adopt resolution approving an amendment to the project plan and boundaries of tax incremental district number 9, Village of Waunakee, Wisconsin.
Okay, a motion's been made by Gary Hertzberg. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second by Kristen Runge. Okay, any other comments from anyone before we take our vote? Okay, seeing none. Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg,
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
No.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Bill Willems.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to our next topic. Discuss and take action on request from Cohen Esri Development Group LLC for village financial contribution to support affordable housing development at 701-705 West Main Street. Who's introduced?
Yeah, and another version of a TIF discussion. Still talking about TIF, but a whole different angle to it here at this moment. Just a couple of weeks ago, Brian Sweeney with Cohen Esri, who's pursuing that project just to the west of McDonald's there, reached out about impact of changes that they're facing in their project. My memo and his attached letter laid some of that out. I assume Brian would like to explain that in a little more detail, and I'll let him do it rather than my trying to summarize it. But long story short, they've had revenues that haven't come through and cost increases that they've experienced on the project on a couple levels. And that's left them in the situation of approaching the village to see if there are alternatives in regards to TIF that might be able to help support their project and make it feasible. As we reviewed the options available to us, there are really two. One would be to create an outright district solely for purposes of supporting this project in ways that they're going to identify. But another option available to us that we could consider is an affordable housing extension. And we've never pursued that as an option before. So I've asked Todd Taves to join us, and he also attached a memo along with an article from the league on this provision in the statutes that might be worth considering in this case. So those are two options, both potentially doable in this case if the board saw fit. And I want Todd to kind of walk through that. And I also want Brian to explain their situation. So maybe first, Chris, if it's okay with you, we could go to Brian to talk about what they're facing, and then to Todd Taves to explain those options. I would say from this evening, what staff is looking for is direction from the board on what to do, which could be no, don't pursue any TIF solution in support of the project. That's a reasonable direction from the board. Another would be to direct staff to pursue one of the two alternatives, either TIF district creation or affordable housing extension. Or a third option is to send this to perhaps to the CDA to kick it around further and explore the options in more depth. So that's what we're looking for from the board in terms of direction tonight. So with that, Brian.
I will say welcome, Brian. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Todd. You have a lot of stuff on your plate here tonight, so thank you for the opportunity to present this. In late April, we were very buoyed by winning a WIDA tax credit in a very competitive environment. There were 64 total applications and 34 awards, and WIDA really liked Waunakee. McFarland, Mount Hord, Fitchburg, and Sun Prairie also received some awards, also received LIHTC award. Talk about the but-for test earlier in the affordable housing realm, but for the grace of God kind of has to happen. Affordable housing projects are tough. They're multi-layered in how they're financed, etc. So we were hoping for a in addition to the LIHTC award, we had submitted an application to the Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Fund, which supports affordable housing in the upper Midwest. And we were very hopeful that we would receive a $600,000 grant. We did not. It was a kind of equally competitive as the WIDA LIHTC project. So that was a big disappointment. In our discussion since April, May with staff and with consultants regarding the design of our project, the 50 unit project was a lot to put on the site, the veterinarian site, 701 West Main. And staff really encouraged us to reach out to the owners of 705 West Main and see if a purchase agreement would be an option. And we have a tentative agreement with them. However, that added an additional $450,000 to the project itself. And thirdly, COVID has really depressed the LIHTC market and caused a reduction in the price of tax credits that investors are willing to pay per tax credit, which translates into kind of another $175,000 reduction to the project. So in my overture with Todd and discussion, he said there were, two possibilities that could be explored. I want to just mention two other points. So this project, 10% of the units, actually 20% of the units, we agreed to serve low-income U.S. veterans and target them for this project. So that's kind of a unique thing. Also, as we looked at our market study, we were just really kind of blown away at the need for this missing middle household. We identified that there are over 1,700 rental households in the village of Waunakee and the immediate area that would income qualify for this project. That just blew us away when we saw that level of need. So I'll leave it there. The staff report and the Ellers report is really comprehensive, so available for comments, but maybe Todd wants to. We are working with Ellers. We actually had a second award in Sun Prairie, and it's a 100-unit senior project, and we worked with Ellers and Todd and negotiated a TIF agreement there.
Okay, Chris, can we ask Todd Taves to now detail some options, or do you have questions for Brian regarding his request?
Let's ask the board members if they have questions first, or they'd rather have. So if you'd like to have questions, go ahead, Nyla.
This isn't a question pertaining to funding. It's about the types of projects that the company does. I've been made aware that there's a big need for handicapped, wheelchair accessible, not only for senior citizens, but for also people within who have families, et cetera. And I'm wondering, to what extent are your units handicapped, wheelchair accessible?
They're 100% handicap wheelchair accessible with a elevator, and so 100% accessible.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other board members, if you have questions for Brian, raise your hand. Okay, seeing none. Todd Daves.
Thank you. All right, just to verify, can you see the memo?
Yes.
We can.
thank
Yeah,
you.
you can click in a couple if you want, if you're able to, Todd, that'll help.
That better?
Looks good.
Okay. So as Todd Schmidt had mentioned, there's a provision in the state law that was enacted close to 10 years ago, but really has not been used to any significant degree. It's kind of been catching on more over the last several years around the state. And just as a matter of course, the village has not had the opportunity to take advantage of this simply because you've had no TIDs close recently. And what that provision is simply when a tax increment district gets to the end of its life, and that either could be simply because it's run out of its statutory time frame, or because it's reached a point where it's accumulated enough revenues to pay off its costs, the village board has the option through the simple adoption of a resolution to extend the life of that district for 1 additional year. And the 1 additional year of tax increment that you collect, you must use that for improving housing stock within the community. It's not restricted to the former TID area. It can be anywhere within the village. And at least 75% of the funds that are collected have to be used for purposes of benefiting affordable housing. And the way the statute defines that is that the housing can cost no more than 30% of the household's gross income. So when you adopt that resolution, you set forth the intended purpose and simply send it in the Department of Revenue, and the TID is extended. So the TID in question, where you could potentially consider applying this in the nearer term, would be TID number 2. And I've outlined a couple scenarios here. And this is the district that is sharing with TID number 5, the downtown district. And at this point, TID 2 is simply remaining open for that purpose. So in other words, it has recovered its own project costs, but it is taking the monies it receives annually, moving them over to TID 5. So right now, the current plan is to leave TID number 2 open through its remaining maximum life. And in terms of the impact on TID number 5, that would allow TID number 5 to close in 2024, which would be the same year then that TID number 2 would close. And right now, TID 5 has a fairly significant negative fund balance. That's why we're moving the money there. And if we stick with that existing plan, the last year we would have a negative fund balance, and TID 5 would be next year, 2021. Under this scenario, the opportunity to leverage monies from this district for affordable housing, the timing of that is such that you would first have access to those dollars in 2025. So we looked at a couple other scenarios. One would involve essentially closing TID number 2 now, or at least prior to April 15th of next year. That's the annual cutoff date where you have to tell the Department of Revenue whether you want an additional year or not. The other alternative is to wait until after April 15th and then close the TID. So in each case, in the case of the soonest possible closure, what it means is the affordable housing dollars would actually be the dollars you're collecting as part of this 2020 levy for 2021 budget. In other words, they'd be available to you as soon as the taxes are collected for 21. If we waited till after April 15th, it would be in your 2022 budget year, roughly 15 months from now. The impacts on TID number 5 is if we close TID 2 now, it would delay the closure of TID number 5 from 24 to 27, so 3 years. It would also result in TID number 5 having a negative fund balance through the year 2024. If we wait till after April 15th, that improves a little. We would have a TID 5 closure in 26 and a negative fund balance through 2022. After I put this memo together at the staff level, there was some discussion, and there's a couple things to understand about this particular scenario. While this does make the funds available essentially immediately, which you could consider using on a project like this, one consideration is that a few years ago, the state exempted additional classes of personal property, and they came up with an aid program. I'm forgetting the number, Renee, right off the top of my head, but it's over $40,000 that this district receives in terms of a personal property aid payment. Just simply due to the way that the Department of Revenue has interpreted that law, they have indicated that when a TID closes, that payment simply goes away, which doesn't make sense, and the legislature understands that. So there was a corrective bill that had passed the Assembly in spring and died simply due to the fact that the Senate adjourned without completing a number of legislative pieces that were on its plate due to COVID. So, under the current scenario, there would be a personal property loss that would result in the village not getting a continuing share of that 40+ thousand, which we think would be around 12,000 every year going forward. Now we think that there's, a likelihood that that legislation will come back and get passed. There's no guarantee of that, but by waiting and considering closure after April, there's the possibility that that could be corrected by then. The other comment that Renee had made is if we take the dollars that you're going to collect as part of the upcoming levy and we use them for affordable housing instead of moving them over to TID number 5 in the 2021 budget year, again, as I mentioned, that negative fund balance will run out longer. But what that does is it essentially puts a reservation on other cash of the village, in particular your general fund. And that would impact the policy you have in terms of identifying what amount of your fund balance is potentially available for deployment for tax relief or other purposes as you see fit. So I think probably our conclusion was this would have some downsides, although it's an option. This would be potentially a better scenario for the two reasons that I stated. If you're interested at all in closing this district earlier than its maximum life. And the last important thing on this option is I didn't mention that the tax collection right now is about $435,000. So that, it's pretty close to the amount of assistance that's being requested. So that's the first alternative. The second alternative, which I can cover quickly, would simply be, as Todd had indicated, creating a new tax increment district. It could be as small as the site itself for the project, a single site tax increment district. It would likely need to be created as a blighted area district or a district in need of conservation or rehabilitation, would have a 27-year life. Now, one thing to understand when we're dealing with workforce or affordable housing is these projects on a comparative basis have a much lower value than a market rate apartment development for the simple reason that they're assessed on the income approach. So if you have lower rents, you necessarily have a lower valuation. So when we're talking about tax increment financing, it's obviously valuation that drives the cash flow. So when we are in a TIF scenario with an affordable project, we're just simply not going to generate as much tax increment, and it will take longer to pay things off. So this is just kind of a spitball estimate at this point, but based on the budget that was presented for this project and looking at the project we recently evaluated at Sun Prairie, we just came up with a very ballpark estimate of what the valuation might end up being. And our projection is that it would take roughly 10 to 13 years of increment collection to pay that $450,000. And again, there'd be associated costs of financing to monetize that on the front end. And how you would raise that capital, that's again subject to negotiations, but it could be advanced from another village fund, it could be borrowed by the village, or it could be done as a pay-as-you-go basis. But the point here is just to understand that TIF in this type of a scenario has somewhat less horsepower than we're talking about when we would have a market rate development.
Okay, Todd, thank you for putting those out there to us. Board members, questions or comments for Todd or Brian at this point? I guess if you have any, please raise your hand. Kristen, come on, you're the housing expert in here. Okay, we're gonna go to Gary. He put his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I mean, I kind of go back to Nyla's comment early, and, you know, these TIFs go on forever and ever. But we understood when we put the downtown TIF in that it was going to need help, but that was the decision of the board at the time, that the redevelopment of downtown was pretty important at that time. And we knew that TIF wouldn't pay off. And that's why we had to go to, you know, the other TIF to borrow to make that work out. As I'm looking through this, I think the initial ask was going to be 30 to 60% of income, and now it sounds like it's going down to 30% of income. And you compare it to the Sun Prairie TIF. Is that Sun Prairie TIF a 30% income TIF? Or is that senior housing?
That's a senior housing project, and it ranges from 30% to 60%, as does our project here.
Okay, I thought that Todd had mentioned 30%.
That's the qualifying criteria in the statute that allows for the 1-year extension. And it's a little bit different metric. It's 30% of the household's gross income is the standard for you to be able to use this money. In that
So
fashion.
if we had 60%, could we use that money?
So again, it's benchmarked against the particular household's gross income. So, you know, if you were to consider doing this, and this is something that, you know, we would have to think about in terms of how it takes shape in an agreement, there'd have to be a documentation requirement where the income of the renters is verified and that the rent doesn't exceed 30% of that income, whatever that income is.
Okay, so it would change from our original agreement of 30 to 60 then.
I think those are two different numbers. The 30 to 60 isn't that HUD financing or HUD income qualification levels, and which is, you know, like a set number based on area median income. I'm asking that as a question because I don't know if I've got that right. Brian, would you know?
I am sorry, Kristen.
So the 30 to 60% categories for income that were in the original proposal for the Cohasset project, are those HUD numbers, 30 to 60% of area median income?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And the 30% that Todd, you mentioned, is of household income, which is a step. So one is the target income levels for the project, and the other is who rents that unit. Even if they fall within those categories, it still can't be more than 30% of their, or if they fall out of that category, I'm assuming too, it still can't be more than 30% of their. So if somebody comes in with a $500,000 a year income and wants to rent, you can't exceed $150,000 a year in rent.
That's correct.
Which would be a lot of rent.
Okay, Kristen, that wasn't what I was expecting, but thank you for
Is there a math lesson for the day?
Well, the question I did want to ask Kristen in relation to the Housing Task Force report, does this support for this purpose, whether it's straight up TIF or the affordable housing extension, does that align with any recommendations from the task force report?
Yeah, I think it could, because we were supposed to pursue policies that would help affordable housing develop within the village limits. I feel like this is a complex issue, though. Would it be wrong to suggest that it go to the CDA for some exploration?
I think that's a reasonable approach of the board, although not required.
Nyla, go ahead.
Mr. Sweeney, is there a timeline that you need a decision made by?
So we are moving toward a March closing of the properties. And we hope to have the project itself financed at the same time. So lining up and it's mid-November, and so lining up the funding sources as quick as possible is important. Yeah.
Todd, on that point, to create the new TID in that spot, do we have the time necessary for that at this point based on that timeline?
You would have to create the tax increment district before you made any expenditures. So it would depend on when funds were actually provided.
Okay. So I guess that's the last option you just presented, where we're creating it for this. Do we have the time to go through the whole process at this point to get an answer by that March where they're trying to get this done? Just
if things were started soon, we could get it done. But again, the limitation is you would not be able to make an expenditure. Now, I'm sure Mr. Sweeney would want the comfort of knowing that things are lined up, but you simply wouldn't be able to make any form of payment until the TID was in place.
Right. Okay. Other board members' questions? Raise your hand, please. Phil? Are you just feeling your beard or you have a question?
No, I'm just mulling.
Okay, mulling is a good word.
Mulling.
So I don't know if Todd can bring back up that chart for everybody to look at again with the 3 different options that you had there. I mean, I'm in favor. I'm not really necessarily in favor of creating another TID. I would assume, Brian Sweeney, that this housing would bring in children.
Yes, it is a family project. WEDA divides its projects into seniors and family. So we have the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, and just kind of as a neat design, while they can, get to their apartment via the lobby, the 3 bedrooms actually have an access from the outside as well.
So with that said, I'm more imposed. Now I'm usually not the first one to say where I'm at right now, but I'm looking at the 2022 budget year. The last one listed there is what I'm probably most in favor of to help our budget. To also make sure that our TID 5 is healthy, especially with our budget maybe potentially being a little bit more unknown in 2022 at this point. I think that would help us a little bit. Is Renee still on here? I'd like her to weigh in too, with her having a much better grasp of our budget than the rest of us. Renee, are you still on?
Yeah, so as Todd Taves mentioned, I did bring up the fact that if we did the middle option of closing it now, we would be losing that, 400,000 or so transfer from TID 2 to TID 5, which then reduces the ability of TID 5 to pay back the general fund. And in my projections to the board during especially in the early budget process, I was projecting out the 2021 unassigned fund balance, and that would have a dramatic impact on my projections. So it would go from 26% at the end of 2021 down to 22%. And then in the future years, depending on how the economy is looking, we'd be right perhaps on the bottom of our 20 to 25% situation. So by doing the third option of waiting a little bit, I think that will greatly help our budget and our ability to, look to fund balance to provide perhaps a little bit of tax relief next year as well.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Brian, I know that you looked at, you're purchasing the house potentially next door, and that was one of your increased costs within this. Do you believe, well, we haven't really seen the ultimate project at this point, so that's one thing that I always get a little, but do you see, if we were to go with that last option, that being acceptable within your ranks?
Could I just quickly add a clarification, Chris? We did check with the auditors to see if they thought it would be a problem if we agreed to do this and perhaps would upfront the money to the project and then wait for the increment to come in scenario 3, and they did not think that was an issue from an audit perspective. So it doesn't necessarily push the timeline back. Is that, if that's helpful?
Okay. Yeah, board members can, obviously I want you to weigh in, but one of our goals for the last several years has been to address affordable housing. This is the first project that's in front of us to address affordable housing, truly, with this project. And so I think it's important that we give this very close attention, and I believe that, this is a good project for the community. Phil, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I've mulled long enough.
Okay.
I didn't like this project when it was presented before because it was too tight for the land. And I didn't think it was fair to the property owner next door. I think buying that property up, making the whole deal a little bit bigger is a good idea. I think that we need the affordable housing. I don't know how you keep it affordable and what the limits are going to be, how many this and that. But I think it's worth going forward and exploring the rest of the options. And that last option looks fairly good to me.
Thank you. Any other comments from board members? Nyla?
I agree with Phil, and one of the current concerns I had when I originally heard about the project was having enough space for children to play and for outdoor activity. And I think with this additional add-on of property, it will make that feasible. And I agree with what Chris said, that we have been looking at the needs for housing for workers, and I think it's important that we look at this project very closely.
Okay. Gary, do you have any comments?
No, I guess, again, I'm concerned with some of the definitions here of affordable housing versus workforce housing, and 60% income versus 30% income, and how that all falls into this. And again, it's been voiced for 10 years in this village that nobody liked the idea of us supporting the downtown TIF, but we thought it was the right thing to do. And now we want to take that TIF and extend it out some more. I don't understand it.
Maybe I'm mistaken. I don't think we're extending a TIF out from this. Did I miss that? With this, we're actually closing a TIF early to get this done. Isn't that correct, Todd Daves?
We'd be closing TID 2 early. I think maybe the question is, are we prolonging the life of TID number 5? Right now, if we stay on the current course, we would close TID 5 in 24. If we went with option 3, it would take 2 more years, but the TID number 5 is still closing before the end of its useful life.
And then what, and TID 2 was supposed to close originally when? Same time, roughly?
Well, TID 2 would close in 2024, which would be, that's the end of its life. It has to close then.
Correct. So the TID, or the last option we're talking about, though, it will close 2022, correct?
That's correct. It would close in 2022, 2 years sooner, which then delays the closure of TID 5 by a couple of years, just because of the stopping the share.
Todd Taves, I have a question for you. The in the first scenario there, and I guess this is a question for Brian as well. Could the village add on the year after in that scenario, with then the funds coming back to the village in 2025, except Cohen Esri would, what I'm trying to go with this, the option of the village fronting funds with the expectation of reimbursement, could we make that work in the first option there? If that makes sense.
Delaying reimbursement to the village till 2025.
Correct.
You know, I think as we talked about, there's nothing that explicitly says you can or cannot reimburse yourself. That was, you know, why Renee had wanted to get the auditor's perspective. I mean, it just generally seems to me that the longer time frame you have between the expenditure and the reimbursement, there's, you know, more uncertainty, more things could change. I mean, I don't envision this, but the law could certainly change in the intervening period. But I just think as the time horizon goes out, you have more uncertainty and potentially some risk.
Okay. Can the board make a decision today? Not today, but can they make a decision here soon on the TID 2 to its max end of life and decide now to add on the additional year after its max life? What's the timing by which they can make that decision?
Within the year prior to whenever you're going
prior
to
to
close
closure.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That kind of messes with where I was trying to go with the idea of leaving it open max life.
Okay, so Todd, you were saying that you were looking for the staff to get some guidance for tonight on how to proceed. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So I think you've heard, well, I'm assuming, I shouldn't say this. Is there any board members, please raise your hand, that is opposed to using one of these methods to assist in funding this project at this time? If you are, raise your hand.
I don't know enough at this time, Chris. I mean, I get concerned with some of the things that Renee just talked about. And until I understand better from her standpoint, how it affects our finances over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, I'm not going to be comfortable with it.
So understanding that, I don't think we're making a decision tonight, Gary. I think is this a project we want to look at and entertain one of these? We don't have all the information yet, as you're saying, and we're going to need to dig a little bit deeper. I agree with you. But is there anything that we would push out? I'm not in favor of opening a new TID. That's, you know, that's going to run for another 10 years for that. I'd rather not do that if we can do it in a much quicker closing way with our other TIF districts. So that one, kind of, for my purposes, that one's kind of off the table to me.
I mean, the only and I brought it up earlier, and I might be confused on this point, and we can take it offline some point, but it looked like before the project was, you know, affordable housing, or what I would call workforce housing, that was 30 to 60% of your income that was going to be based on that. And now, like this project, if we go with a TIF or we go with this project, it goes down to 30% of income. Is that correct?
No, Brian, they have not changed the project in terms of and I believe that for having been awarded the LIHTC, they can't mess with those categories any longer. That's set by virtue of the LIHTC award. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct. Yeah.
So is
But I
that,
think what I hear,
go ahead.
but I think what I hear Gary saying is he needs to learn more. And I think
Yeah.
the suggestion that I offered earlier is that a good place for that sort of digestion to occur is the CDA. And my question to the board then is the board comfortable assigning the CDA with the task of reviewing this in more detail?
Well, I think,
in my opinion, it should be at the finance committee.
I think it could go there as well.
I think it should be at the finance committee.
When we say like the CDA will give us then a recommendation,
I
they're
think
not
that's a
making
possible.
the final decision. Is that
No,
the-
and I
it
wouldn't.
would come back to us again.
Correct.
Okay.
Nyla?
I have a concern with the timing. If it goes to the CDA, and right now we have someone looking into housing projects, et cetera, because the CDA was kind of stuck. What's the chances that they're going to be able to come to a conclusion with this? That's just a thought.
I think it's a very direct thing that we would be taking to them. And it would have to be on our December agenda. So CDA meets tomorrow night. So it's the same week next month. So I think that'll be December 8th for when they would meet. But I think we could get that out in one meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think now the facts are really clear, and the program parameters are established and unwavering. So I agree with Chris. I think this would be a one meeting scenario.
I do agree with Gary that it probably makes sense for it to go to finance too, to have a discussion with Renee about that. So
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this, guys, CDA has already recommended, hey, we should have more affordable housing. So I don't know why we would send it back there, because they're going to come back with the same conclusion. To me, this is a financial decision for the village on how we handle our finances over the next however long this impact has on our finances for the village. It doesn't have anything beyond the finance committee and the village boards really input, I don't think. But we can send it there. It'll just take another month.
Well, I think I would say,
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say quick, Gary, we've got a really talented group of people there on the CDA, and they want to be of service to the village board. I understand what you're saying, that it's clear that they're already in pursuit of finding affordable housing solutions, but there's some skills there that I think could benefit the board in sending it back for them to digest. I guess that's what I'm saying. To then inform you in your decision making.
So where that would take place then, and where it would come back, both finance and CDA, we would be having it at our second meeting in December, is where we would be discussing this again with more information from both of those committees.
And just to speak from the finance perspective, we can certainly discuss it at finance. My only concern was really with that option 2 in not being able to use the increment right away in 2021 for our fund balance. I mean, we're not going to really know our financial picture for 2022 for, sometime till mid to late year next year. So, we can certainly educate at the finance committee level. But my main concern was if we went with option 2 in the immediate closure and the impact that I already knew it had on my projections. So, but we're not really going to be able to do much more long-term planning in December, for 2022 and 2023, but we can certainly discuss, the impacts.
Okay, so is that acceptable to everybody that we would have it at those 2 committees, and we will come back at our second meeting in December with more information, a better, clearer picture for us. maybe not of 100% with 2022, 2023 from our village finances perspective, but for this project and how it will be impacted from those TIF districts, whichever decision we do choose. Is there anybody who's opposed to taking that route? Please raise your hand. And don't feel bad if you don't like that route. Okay, so that is how we'll proceed. Todd, do you have your direction?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much for coming this evening and sharing your project with us, and we will keep moving along just like you're wanting to.
Thank you very much, all of you. Appreciate it.
Have a good night. Okay, we've only been here now for 2 hours and 32 minutes. You guys are doing great this evening. So our school board members would probably say that this is a normal thing for them, maybe even longer. So let's try to finish this all up. So next we have discuss and take action on the Parisi Construction Company, Inc. contract for Hanover South Park Tennis Court Rehabilitation Project. And look at Sue McDade just popped right on. She's ready to roll. She's been waiting this whole time for this. You have the floor. Go ahead.
Super easy agenda item tonight. A construction project replacing the 2 tennis courts in the North Hanover Park. We went out to bid early in October with 2 different options on how to complete that project. One was a post-tension concrete system, and the other was a traditional asphalt system. We received 3 bids. Post-tension concrete was far more expensive than Renee allowed us to spend. And so we went to the park committee with the traditional asphalt system, Parisi Construction. We're hoping that you will approve their contract. We worked with them most recently on the Rip Park Tennis Court project. They were a great partner, and money is available in the capital project to cover this cost.
Phil, I'm just gonna throw it over to you with regards to parks, since you lead that, and I know this was a unanimous vote, so go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, the park committee loved this idea. They love the Parisi, and I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the park committee to recommend awarding the Hanover South Tennis Court asphalt bid to Parisi Construction of Madison.
Okay, so a motion's been made by Phil. Do we have a second?
I'll second. And can I ask a question?
Okay, second by Aaron. Any other questions or comments? Aaron, go ahead.
How long, I guess, like how often do we have to reconstruct these?
You know, standard life of a tennis court is probably somewhere in the 20-year range. These are not quite that old, but there was some underground water issues that really shortened the life of this particular set of tennis courts, and we have plans in place to rectify that, so they should be there for a long time.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Raise your hands. Okay, seeing none. Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Gary Hertzberg,
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Bill Willems,
Yes.
Aaron Moran.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next we have discuss and take action on the SIP for Jimmy John's sub shop Kilkenny Commons with a reduced setback of 20 feet from the lot line adjacent to County Highway Q for a garbage enclosure as recommended by the Plan Commission. I am choosing to recuse myself from our conversation and abstaining from vote since my employer is right next door to this and I don't want to have any conflicts there. So with that said, Kevin, I'll go to you.
Yeah, at the last Plan Commission meeting, make sure I'm not muted.
You're good.
Okay, thanks. At the last Plan Commission meeting, the commission approved the site plan for Jimmy John's. And as part of the site plan approval, they approved an enclosure, really it's the dumpster enclosure, which I'm highlighting here. It's next to Highway County Trunk Q. And really that was pushed forward closer to the roadway to be within 20 feet of the road right away. And the PUD documents actually require 25 feet setback from the road right away. In our typical or normal zoning jurisdiction or zoning ordinance, 20 feet is a standard, but in this particular PUD, we do have 25 feet as a setback requirement. And one of the reasons why, and I'll show you this, is that there's a double lane for the drive-through. We call those the escape routes. So if you get into one of these drive-throughs, you have the ability to change your mind and get out. You're not stuck in the line with 10 people in front of you or 10 people behind you and being stuck in the line and can't get away. So that's really the reasoning for this, and it also allows for the truck traffic to make that maneuver and for dumpster location. So as part of this, you'd only be approving the setback requirement change for this structure on this lot. So you're not extending it to other parts of the development. So the plan, like I said, the plan commission recommended approval, but it would take board action in order to do that. And I do want to show you what this dumpster looks like because it's pretty impressive.
Kevin, this is Todd. I show Paul Kardatsky has his hand up in the participant room. Was he to speak on this topic?
I don't know who that is. He may be the store owner.
Todd, go ahead and allow him in.
Okay, now, and Jerry put his hand up as well. So I'm expecting there, and Mike Lawton as well. So I'm expecting there's a connection there. So I'll bring all in.
All right, with that, that's all I had to share, and I'd be willing to take some questions from the village board.
Okay.
Oh, never mind.
So I see Jerry and Paul are now in and can speak.
I can identify myself. I'm Paul Kardatsky, and I'm the architect working with the Tierneys.
Go ahead.
Happy to answer any questions. I think Kevin went through it pretty well. Anybody who's been to the site knows this is one of the other thoughts is that the location, we're about 10 to 12 feet lower than that bike path that's out there. So it's actually, quite a ways down. So one of the thoughts of keeping it on that side, it actually reduces the visibility from the roadway. Again, the roof was added, I think, through discussion there with staff and staying with the brown slate, burnished slate roof to match the Animart building. Happy to answer any questions, and I think you had other images there, Kevin. That was, thank you very much for sharing that.
Okay, so board members, questions for Kevin or comments? Raise your hands, please. Phil, go ahead.
I've got a lot of experience with dumpsters, and I like the idea of this dumpster arrangement they have. It's straight in. These trucks can get in, do their business, and back out real fast. They're not going to be jockeying around on the site, having to go 90 degrees here, 90 degrees there. I think it's a good idea to have it there. It's the roof is slanted, so it's not too obtrusive, and they've got a decorative front. I kind of approve of it.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Raise your hands, please. Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the SIP for Jimmy John Sub Shop with the reduced setback of 20 feet for the dumpster location along County Q.
Okay, motion by Phil Willems. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Aaron Moran. Okay, any other comments? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Phil Willems,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Caitlin, I abstained in case if you had that already, so. All right, thank you.
Yep, I had that. That's why I didn't even call on you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, next we have discuss and take action on Strand Task Order 20.08 related to 2021 Public Works Improvement. Kevin?
Yeah, here's the list of the projects we have scheduled for next year. The Public Works author made a recommendation to the village board that we proceed with the bidding of these projects.
Okay, board members, any questions for Kevin? I just have one, Kevin. Kristen's comment earlier, if we would have cut 60,000 from the budget out of Public Works, if we went in the middle there, which project would get eliminated? I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna put you on the spot with that one, but what kind of things are we talking about? How much of this would get eliminated if we took 60,000 out of the budget?
it's hard to say. I don't have the numbers the numbers in front of me, but what we'll do this year, like we did last year, because we have, we're slightly over the projected budget. We'll bid, we'll pick one of these streets out as an alternate bid, knowing that if our bids come in high, we have the ability to negotiate down and negotiate one of them out. And I usually defer to Bill Frederick on, on making that decision. He's the guy in the field. He's the guy that I rely on to make that call.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Other than I'm going to say, since you brought up Bill, we're thinking about you. I hope you're getting better after your accident. So take care. All right, I'm going to make the motion to approve the Strand motion to approve Strand Task Order 20.08 related to 2021 Public Works Improvement. Do I have a second? Second by Nyla Fry. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please, Caitlin.
Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Bill Willems, we'll come back to Phil. Aaron Moran,
Yes.
Gary Hertzberg,
Yes.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Bill Willems,
Thumbs up or thumbs down, Phil?
Phil, put your thumb up if you're in agreement.
Oh, no.
motion passed.
So he froze and went out. So I guess we just give him a non-vote.
There he is.
Hey, I'm back. I got destroyed. I agree.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thanks,
Motion
Phil.
passes.
All right, and 7, discuss and take action on racism, tolerance, and equality in the Waunakee community. Todd?
I'm still concerned about how Phil spilled grape juice on his keyboard and blew up his computer like that.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Todd.
Okay, real quick. Good work is moving along. The Create Waunakee or Waunakee what is it? Want to Talk Diversity Facebook group is coordinating a peace walk event. Details are coming together. It's kind of becoming more of a drive-through event at Rotary Lights, and that's on the 22nd. I and staff and others, Chris involved too, have been really busy with the university scoping work. I think I've been on five meetings now, another couple coming up on scoping out the projects for university and the diversity, equity, inclusion work we're doing with them. Staff, along with Waunakee Neighborhood Connection staff and school district staff, are talking about a collaboration project to work broadly with the community on an involved learning project in relation to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So stay tuned for more information on that. We'll have likely a proposal to you within the next couple of months. And then finally, Caitlin and I are busy preparing for a staff project to continue our staff engagement around these subjects in 2021. So that's the work.
Okay, thank you for the updates, Todd. In an absence of Bill Branham tonight in his favorite motion, I am going to make the motion to adjourn this evening. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Gary Hertzberg. Thank you, everybody. Caitlin, roll call vote, please.
Nyla Fry,
Yes.
Kristen Runge,
Yes.
Chris Zellner,
Yes.
Phil Willems. Not again, Phil Willems,
Yes.
Aaron Moran,
Yeah.
Gary Hertzberg.
Yes.
You are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody, have a nice
Night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.